My whole life has been a performance. I don't mean that in a dramatic, all the world's a stage kind of way. It's more literal for me. Every morning, I wake up and put on a costume. Not clothes, but a personality. I practice smiles in the mirror, rehearse small talk in the shower, and study the way people's eyes crinkle when they laugh at a joke. I have notebooks filled with observations. Maintain eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds. Nod to show you're listening. Offer a compliment about their shoes if conversation stalls. It's exhausting, this constant act of trying to be normal, of trying to mimic the effortless way other people just are. You see, my brain is wired differently. It's a machine built for patterns, for systems, for the beautiful, logical dance of data. I can see the architecture in a line of code, the hidden rhythm in a chaotic city street, the mathematical certainty in a flock of birds turning in perfect unison. But I can't see the simple things, the things everyone else seems to be born knowing. I don't understand the invisible threads that connect people, the unspoken rules of friendship, the subtle shift in tone that means I'm joking instead of I'm angry. To me, the social world is a foreign language, spoken in whispers, and I'm just a tourist fumbling with a phrase book, always a step behind, always getting it wrong. This isn't just a quirk. It's not some charming eccentricity. It's a fundamental flaw, a crack in my foundation that I've been trying to patch over my entire life. The shame of it is a physical weight, something that settles in my chest and makes it hard to breathe. It started young, as these things often do. I remember one afternoon in 3rd grade, during recess. A girl named Sarah was showing everyone a drawing she had made of her family. It was a typical kid's drawing, stick figures with big round heads and scribbled hair. Everyone was cooing over it, saying how lovely it was. I was just looking at it, really looking at it. I noticed the way she'd drawn her little brother shorter than the family dog. I saw that she'd colored her mom's hair yellow, even though her mom was a brunette. My brain, the pattern-seeking machine, just saw the inconsistencies. Without meaning to be cruel, I pointed them out. That's not right. Your brother is taller than your dog, and your mom's hair is brown. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face crumpled, her drawing crushed in her small fist as she ran away crying. The other kids stared at me, their eyes wide with a kind of horrified pity. In that moment, I learned that honesty, my honesty, was a weapon. I learned that the way I saw the world was not just different, but wrong, defective. That day, I stopped trusting my own instincts. I started building my costume, piece by painful piece. My life's work, my obsession, is finding a cure for this. Not for them, but for me. I became a neuroscientist, diving into the labyrinth of the human mind, searching for the switch that would make me like everyone else. I'm chasing a miracle, a way to rewrite my own faulty code, to finally shed this skin and just be. My research led me to the fringe, to the dusty corners of science where theories get weird and funding gets scarce. I started studying consciousness itself, not just the mechanics of the brain, but the nature of being. I became obsessed with the concept of shared consciousness, of pure, unfiltered connection. The idea was intoxicating. Imagine, for a moment, not having to guess what someone is feeling. Imagine knowing instantly and completely. No more misinterpretations, no more awkward silences, no more fumbling for the right words. Just perfect, absolute understanding. It was everything I had ever wanted. I called my theoretical model the static, a state of pure, unified being. It was a beautiful concept, a sea of thought where every drop was connected to the whole. In my papers, I wrote about it as the next stage of evolution, a transcendence of the clumsy, isolated self. But in the quiet of my lab late at night, staring at the faint, shimmering noise on a disconnected monitor, a different word would sometimes flicker in my mind. Not transcendence, erasure. It was a terrifying thought, the idea that in becoming one with everything, you might cease to be anything at all. A promise of ultimate connection that felt, in its own way, like the ultimate prison. A perfect, silent, eternal state of non-being. It was the cure I was desperate for, and the one thing I feared more than anything else.
The incident in the lab changed things. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by a person, but by a concept. It was a strange, pervasive paranoia that followed me home, that lingered in the corners of my small apartment. I started seeing it in the periphery, a faint shimmer in my reflection in the subway window, a momentary haze over the faces of people in old photographs. It was like the world had a loose connection, constantly threatening to dissolve into static. I tried to focus on my work, to find a logical explanation, but the fear was a constant distraction. The unease was a low hum beneath the surface of my days, a constant reminder of that blank, empty face in the monitor. I stopped running the simulations. I felt like a man who had knocked on the door of a haunted house and was now terrified that something had followed him home. The dread was a slow poison, seeping into every part of my life, isolating me even more than my own nature already did. I was afraid to be alone, but I was even more afraid to be with people. How could I explain that I was being haunted by a theoretical state of being? How could I describe the chilling emptiness of that reflected face? They would think I was crazy. Maybe I was. The thought was a cold comfort, somehow less terrifying than the alternative, that the static was real and that it was aware of me, that it had seen my desperate desire to be normal, to connect, and it answered. In a moment of pure, unadulterated desperation, I turned to the one place my academic mind scorned, the dark corners of the internet. On a clandestine forum, buried under layers of encryption, I found them. People like me, in a way. People who felt broken, who were looking for a fix. They spoke in code about a miracle pill, a nootropic cocktail that promised to optimize social pathways. It was snake oil, I knew it. A dangerous, unregulated concoction sold to the desperate. But the testimonials were like a siren song. I can finally hold a conversation. My anxiety is gone. I feel normal. I ordered a single vial, my trembling fingers typing in the details for a cryptocurrency transfer. It arrived a week later in a plain, padded envelope containing a small, unlabeled bottle filled with a dozen chalky white pills. I held one on my palm, a tiny key that might unlock the life I'd always dreamed of, or a poison that would destroy what little I had. I swallowed it with a glass of water, the bitterness of it clinging to my tongue. The first day was miraculous. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic change. It was a quiet unfolding. I went to the coffee shop I visit every morning. Usually, the interaction is a minefield. I rehearse my order. I force a smile. I try to make the right amount of eye contact with the barista. It's a 5-minute ordeal that leaves me drained. But that morning, it was different. The words just came. "Morning, Anna. Just the usual, please. How's your daughter's science fair project coming along?" I remembered her name. I remembered she had a daughter. I remembered she had mentioned a science fair a week ago. The information was just there, accessible, not locked away behind a wall of social anxiety. Her face lit up. We had a genuine 2-minute conversation. It was effortless. It was glorious. For the first time in my 32 years, I felt like I was speaking the same language as everyone else. The world, which had always felt like a complex, unreadable text, was suddenly clear. I could see the subtle cues, the flicker of emotion in someone's eyes, the slight hesitation in their voice that spoke volumes. The constant grinding effort of performance was gone, replaced by an intuitive grace. I walked through the city that afternoon, not as a tourist, but as a native. I was one of them. I was normal. I was fixed. I wept that night, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. The shame, that heavy cloak I'd worn since childhood, was finally gone. I felt light. I felt whole. I took another pill the next morning, eager for more of this beautiful, simple peace. The first crack in my new, perfect world appeared on the third day. It happened at the grocery store, a mundane place for a profound horror. I was standing in the checkout line, enjoying the simple rhythm of it all, when I felt a sudden, sharp spike of something that wasn't mine. It was a wave of cold, greasy panic, so intense that it made my stomach clench. I looked up, confused, my gaze landing on the man in front of me. He was a middle-aged guy in a cheap suit, buying milk and a lottery ticket. He looked bored, tapping his foot impatiently, but that wasn't what I was feeling from him. Underneath the placid surface, a silent scream was echoing. I can't lose this job. I can't. She'll leave me. God, she'll take the kids. The thoughts weren't words. They were raw, visceral feelings flooding my mind like sewage. I could feel the sweat on his palms, the frantic thumping of his heart, the bitter taste of his desperation. I stumbled back, my own breath catching in my throat. I looked away, trying to break the connection, my eyes falling on the cashier. She was a young woman, maybe a college student, with a bored expression as she scanned the items. But what I felt from her was a deep, aching loneliness, a hollow sorrow that felt like a physical weight in my own chest. No one sees me. I'm invisible. I could feel the sting of her unshed tears, the cold emptiness of her apartment waiting for her. I slammed my basket onto the floor and fled, running out into the street, gasping for air. The world hadn't become clear, it had become transparent. The pill hadn't just taught me the language of social cues, it had plugged me directly into the source code of human suffering. I was no longer just an observer, I was a receiver, and the broadcast was a cacophony of endless pain.
My apartment, once my sanctuary, became a prison. I tried to rationalize it, to deny what was happening. It was just a side effect, a temporary hyperempathy that would fade. My scientific mind desperately sought a logical pattern, a way to control the influx. I went back to the forum, but the page was gone. The seller, the testimonials, all of it had vanished into the digital ether. I was alone with this. I tried to shield myself, locking my doors, drawing the blinds, putting on noise-canceling headphones. But the silence only made it worse. Without the distraction of the city's hum, the psychic noise became clearer, more distinct. I could feel the simmering resentment of my downstairs neighbor over a rent increase, the quiet grief of the old woman across the hall whose husband had died last year, the frantic, buzzing anxiety of a student in the building cramming for an exam. Their emotions bled through the walls, seeping into my mind, becoming my own. My carefully constructed self was dissolving, my own feelings lost in the tidal wave of others. Denial crumbled into terror. This wasn't a side effect. The pill wasn't a fix. It was an accelerator, a chemical key that had unlocked a door in my mind, and I had no idea how to close it. The point of no return came on a Tuesday during a torrential downpour.
I'd run out of food and was forced to venture outside. The rain hammered against the concrete, a cold, sterile smell filling the air. I thought the storm might help, that the noise and chaos would drown out the inner voices. I was wrong. The rain only seemed to amplify it. I made it 2 blocks before I had to stop, leaning against the slick wall of a building, overwhelmed. The subway grate on the sidewalk was belching steam, and with it, I felt a surge of collective despair. It was the emotional residue of millions of people who had passed this spot, a tapestry of hurried stress, weary resignation, and fleeting moments of anger. The city wasn't just a collection of individuals anymore. It was a single, sprawling organism of consciousness, and I was a raw, exposed nerve ending within it. I looked up at the crowd of people hurrying past under their umbrellas. I no longer saw faces. I saw a shimmering, distorted haze hovering over them, a visual static that pulsed with their collective emotions. A man in a tailored coat brushed past me, and I was hit with a jolt of his smug satisfaction over recent promotion, so potent it made me nauseous. A woman rushing her child along radiated a fierce, protective love that was so intense it felt like a physical blow. It was too much. The beautiful, effortless connection I had craved was this, a horrifying, intimate violation. I was drowning in humanity. I stumbled through the streets, a ghost in my own city. I could feel everything. The low-grade hum of anxiety from the financial district, the pulsing, hopeful energy from the university campus, the deep, historical sorrow that seemed to emanate from the old cobblestone streets of the historic quarter. I could feel the loneliness of 1,000 apartment windows, the secret shame hidden behind 1,000,000 locked doors. The static was no longer just a theory or a peripheral shimmer. It was the very air I was breathing. It was a tangible presence, a vast interconnected web of every thought, every feeling, every secret pain of every person in the city, all at once. It was a single collective scream of consciousness that had no beginning or end. And the pill, the goddamned miracle pill, hadn't made me normal. It had turned me into a perfect antenna, tuning me into a frequency of universal suffering. I was no longer Rafa, the man who struggled with patterns and people. I was just a conduit, a vessel for a pain that was not my own, but was now inescapably all I was. I found myself in an elevator, the sterile box lifting me silently upwards. I didn't know which building it was. I just knew I had to get away from the noise on the ground, seeking a quiet that I instinctively knew no longer existed. The elevator doors opened onto a rooftop, and for a blessed second, there was a semblance of peace. The city was spread out below me, a breathtaking grid of light and shadow under the bruised purple of the evening sky. The rain had stopped, and the air was cold and clean, smelling of wet concrete and ozone. For a moment, I could almost believe I was alone, high above the chaos. But then it washed over me again, stronger than ever. Looking down, I didn't see buildings and cars. I saw a neural network, a living, breathing organism of interconnected despair. Each pinprick of light was a soul, and I could feel the frantic, buzzing energy of all of them at once. The collective hum was a physical pressure against my skull. The static was not just in the people, it was the city itself, a single seething entity of emotion. I sank to my knees on the gritty surface of the roof, clutching my head. This was the pure, unfiltered connection I had theorized about, the transcendence I had written papers on. It was hell, a hell of perfect, absolute understanding. I saw every hidden insecurity, every repressed fear, every secret act of cruelty, every quiet moment of heartbreak. The world was an open wound, and I was tasting the infection. In my agony, a desperate primal instinct took over. I tried to fight back. I tried to rebuild the walls, to find the old familiar patterns of my own mind. I tried to remember what it was like to be me. I desperately searched for the comfort of my own singular isolation. Please, I whispered to the empty air, the words torn from me by a sob. Let me be disabled again. Please let me be broken. I just want to be myself. I pleaded for the return of my flaws, for the protective shell of my autism, for the quiet, orderly solitude of the world I had spent my entire life trying to escape. My plea was a single dying note in an infinite symphony of pain. It was swallowed instantly by the all-encompassing roar of the static. There was no escape. There was no going back. In that final, horrifying moment on the edge of that skyscraper, a terrifying clarity washed over me. It was a perfect, cold, logical understanding, the kind my own brain would have appreciated. The pill hadn't made me better or more human. It had simply stripped away the filters, the necessary delusions that allow a person to exist as an individual. It had tuned me into the fundamental frequency of the universe, and that frequency was suffering. My trauma, my lifelong feeling of being defective and isolated, wasn't a flaw. It was a shield, a necessary barrier that kept the horrifying, crushing weight of everyone else's reality at bay. My desperate quest to be normal, to connect, was a suicidal urge to dissolve into the ocean of collective agony. The static was not a predator that hunted me. It was a natural state, a universal truth waiting for anyone foolish enough to open the door. I'd willingly walk through it seeking a cure, only to find that disease was existence itself. A single silent tear traced a path through the grime on my cheek. It was the last thing that felt truly my own. I looked down once last time, no longer seeing a city but a beautiful, terrible tapestry of merged consciousness. I was already a part of it. This was just the last step. I chose the ultimate silence over the cacophony. I chose submission. With a final quiet exhalation, I stepped off the ledge.
The aftermath was silence. Not the peaceful, restorative silence I had craved, but a profound and absolute emptiness. On the rooftop, the only sound was the wind whistling around the abandoned maintenance sheds. The city below continued its frantic, ceaseless hum, unaware of the single screaming voice that had just been extinguished. My death was not an escape, it was an absorption, a final, tragic act of surrender. I had spent my entire life performing normality, convinced that my own mind was a defective instrument. That core trauma, the belief that my very nature was a flaw to be corrected, became the fuel for my own destruction. In my desperate search for a key to unlock human connection, I had found a truth I was not equipped to handle. That to be truly connected is to be consumed by the totality of human experience, and that experience, at its core, is pain. I had begged to be a part of the whole, not understanding that the cost of entry was the self. In the end, I got what I wanted. I was no longer isolated. I was one with the ceaseless, silent scream of the world. I was, finally, perfectly, horrifyingly normal.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.